Today I would like to do a simple, if I can, a pretty quick video on the United States Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights. Personally, I prefer the United States Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. But reality does not dictate that so. So, of course, we live in a country, or we live in America, under the United States Constitution. And being born and raised in America under those particular rights and statutes and all the codes or acts of Congress that are derived therefrom, I abide by them. So I have no choice. This is, unless it's changed back to the Articles of Confederation, that's the way it is. So, and it's guaranteed 99.4% that it would never be turned back to the Articles of Confederation or the United States Declaration of Independence. So therefore, I live under the United States Constitution. So with that said, I just want to speak about just a few things, that's all, that has to do with the United States Constitution. Now, the Bill of Rights was actually put in there later, after the U.S. Constitution was ratified. The articles of the U.S. Constitution was really for the centralized government. It was really about the government itself. It had very little to do with the people. And then in, I think it was 1791, which was about a couple of years after the U.S. Constitution was actually put in place, that's when they had the first 10 amendments to the Constitution itself, called the Bill of Rights, which had more to do with the people, even though the powers that be at the time, like I said in the other video, Alexander Hamilton and the likes of him would have preferred not to have the Bill of Rights, but strictly have just the articles of the U.S. Constitution. But because the people made an issue out of it, after a couple of years they decided to amend the Constitution. So these are just amendments, like an addendum to a contract. It's really just an add-on to the Constitution, sort of after the fact, sort of an afterthought. But they did it so the people would not uprise. The people were the majority of the people, and so if they wanted to, they could have had at that time a revolution, another American revolution against the elitists, and they probably would have won once again. So in order to appease the masses, they amended the Constitution. The First Amendment, and I'm not going to speak to every single one, but there were just specific ones that I wanted to speak to. And I pulled it up here. It's the archives.gov site. And so it's a legitimate site. Amendment 1 says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What's interesting is that's the very First Amendment, which it pretty much tells you what was actually going on from 1789 to 1791. Because basically what it was about was you had the masses of people, the Americans, the majority, that were saying, hey, hold it here. We have too much of a federalized, centralized government. That's not what we fought in the American Revolution. And so the powers that be, the wealthy elite, decided to appease the masses so they wouldn't have a revolution. So they put it in there and said, you have a right to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. That is, you can take it all the way to the United States Supreme Court, petition a complaint, and have it ruled upon. You could take it to your Congress persons, either House of Representatives or Senate, to have your petition addressed. And then it's interesting, you have to understand, at the time there was a Church of England, was pretty much governed by the King of England, King George, which they also had fought against him. Part of the reason why they had a war in 1776, the American Revolution, was to fight this very powerful theocracy. And so they once again amended the U.S. Constitution so it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. In other words, the government can't have its own church, like they had the Church of England, King George's church. So they decided to say, hey, okay, we won't have a Church of America. So, in other words, Church of England, we won't have a Church of America. So they decided against that. And the other thing was bridging the freedom of speech. That is, you're permitted to speak up as long as you do not incite or provoke or create violence in that freedom of speech. You know, like they say, don't ever yell fire in a movie theater, because when you do, people will run out and trample upon each other and maybe even kill each other or hurt each other or injure each other. Well, it's the same concept, that there are restrictions and limitations as to how much you can say. Like, for instance, you have a right to say, like I could go on YouTube and say, fuck you to Obama. Fuck you, Obama. I could say that. Now, on the other hand, if I say, well, I'm not going to say it, because there's people that watch, the government watches YouTube, so I don't want to say it in any way that sets off any alarm bells. But let's say, I'll phrase it this way. If you say something about Obama or to the government in a way that makes them even slightly feel any apprehension that you may be a threat, be it a physical threat or even a threat that you're inciting something like, well, I'm not going to say it, but let's say if you say it in a way that others other people outside of yourself wind up acting upon what you say and inflict harm or injury to the government or people or buildings or establishments or physical property or anything along those lines, then yes, then the government can come in and do some nasty things to you. They will definitely question you, and they could even have a warrant for your arrest and put you in a bad place. And the day and age that we live in today, it depends on the level of threat, but you can almost, even though you're an American, and even if you don't even have any guilt by association or any association to any terrorist groups, you can still be considered a terrorist if the level of threat rises above to the point that you stir enough people up that you create a sort of a gang of violence. In other words, you create a situation that more than one creates a situation that is in violation of the law. And that will set off an alarm bell to the federal government, let alone your state government or local government for that, your municipality. But this mainly has to do with the federal government. Like I said in the other video, every state has its own constitution, and that pretty much regulates each state. But these amendments have to do really with the federal government, except for the 14th Amendment, which permits the federal government to interfere directly into a state's sovereign territory if there are any laws that the U.S. Congress had passed that were violated, like racial hate, or like racial hate has a lot, that's a big deal, or your civil rights, like your nationality or race, sex, stuff like that. If it falls under their jurisdiction, under the 14th Amendment, then the federal government can inquire and start its own investigation and even try you civilly, let alone criminally, but usually civilly under the U.S. Department of Justice. So you have to be careful, even though you have freedom of speech, you have to be careful how you do it. And the same with the freedom of press. The press can be anything. Press can be anywhere from Playboy and Penthouse magazines to the Washington Post, or to the New York Times, or to the Tulsa World newspaper. The press is the press, literally the press. Meaning it's the machine itself. It could be your own book that you publish. And this is all protected, as long as, again, you don't incite or provoke any type of violence. Let's say you write a book, and the book is all about how to, how to do harm to the federal government, its buildings, its people, whatever. You're going to wind up having someone investigate you and probably indict you for whatever crime you had committed. So there's limitations and restrictions on your rights in the Bill of Rights. Now, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, when they say well-regulated militia, that doesn't mean some people in Montana or Wyoming or Idaho all getting together. Like for instance, a perfect example, David Koresh. Now, I have my mixed feelings on how the federal government went in there and burned down the entire place and didn't even care if kids died in it. I have a problem with that. But then again, he shouldn't have been hoarding all these guns and rifles and all this other stuff in his compound. Because what it means by a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, it has to do with the state itself. That is, it's a state militia, not a David Koresh militia or a Wyoming or Montana militia. There's a gray area there, but you can't, in other words, you can't decide to get a whole group of, let's say, 20 people and call yourself a militia, and then you decide you have an uprising against the state or especially against the federal government without your state permission. Now, for instance, let's say, Texas has always talked about sedition. They always wanted to become a free state. Okay? So, but let's say only, 200 people in Texas decide to have an uprising against the federal government with arms. You're going to go and get locked up. But on the other hand, let's say if the state of Texas itself, through its executive branch as well as its legislature, decide, or even through its own Supreme Court rulings, decide to war or go to war with the federal government in order to separate itself from the federal government. They can do that, actually, as a state. But, of course, they're probably going to lose because, especially these days, the actual military might or power that the federal government has will probably snuff them down pretty quickly. But under the Amendment 2 of the Bill of Rights, they actually do have a right to do that, to physically, as a state, not just little groups, but in an actual state, or even Oklahoma State, any state, can actually go up against the federal government with arms and to separate itself from the union that is from all the states, from America, from the U.S. government itself. Like I said, I doubt they would ever win, but they do have that right to do that. Now, on the other hand, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, that means you can have a gun, or if it's registered or whatever have you, go through a process. Of course, you can't have a tank on your front lawn. You can't have bazookas and all this other crap. I don't know why you would want to have a bazooka or a tank. Maybe your state militia may have. The state itself, let's say state of Texas, probably has its own serious arms. But as far as the people themselves, it says you have a right to keep and bear arms does not mean you can have a tank on your, because that you would have to have a permit for that. Now, I would think maybe certain museums and stuff might have a tank, but they're usually inoperable, and if they're not inoperable, they have to go through a process to get that license to be able to put a tank on the museum's lawn, to show it off, to exhibit it, to have other people, take a look at it, or to go through the museum. It becomes more of a piece of to look at. It's not to be used. So there's restrictions and limitations on the Amendment 2 as well. That is, you can't have a bazooka, you can't have an F-16. It's crazy, People think, I can buy anything I like. That's crazy. No, it's okay to have a rifle or a gun or a pistol, to either go hunting with it, or though I feel sorry for those poor animals. These days you don't have to do that. Maybe, maybe many years ago you may have had to, but now, you just go to the grocery store and buy your meat. If you're not a vegetarian, I mean, I like meat, but I want to go and kill an animal for it. Actually, funny thing today, I go into the back room of the house, and what's in there? There's a black crow. He got in through the attic, and I was like, and he's running. It's flying back and forth in the room, and I'm like, hopefully this bird don't peck me on the head. Now, somebody else probably would try to capture it, kill it, try to keep it as a pet or whatever. And I'm very pro-animal rights, so to speak. Not weird way, but just that they have as much right to, not right, but they have they want to survive, and they have their own pleasures as well. So anyway, so I was able to get into the room without it attacking me, because it's going to be in a defensive mode, of course. Doesn't know me from anything. It considers me more of a threat probably than anything else. And didn't, of course, know my intentions, and I couldn't communicate with it because I don't speak bird language. So anyway, I was able to open up the sliding glass door and open it up, and in about a minute's time or so, he or she flew out the door, and I felt pretty good about that it escaped without harm, because it was banging up against the glass door. It could have hurt itself because it doesn't realize that it's a glass. It looks like it go out. They don't have that depth perception. Plus, they don't know what a door is. That's a human invention. That's not a dog. A dog. Well, it's not a dog invention either, but it's not a bird invention either. And so finally, it went free. Well, so my whole point, I'm not into killing animals, but some people do. They like to hunt. I could sort of understand the strategic thing about it, but do you have to kill it? I mean, I don't know. Why not hunt with paintballs? You know what I mean? I mean, if you really, hit the animal with a paintball. Anyway, but people have a right to have arms or guns or pistols or rifles to go in hunting. To them, it's a sport. Of course, they probably wouldn't want to be hunted themselves, but that's what they do. And then, especially in Oklahoma, they do that a lot. And then, of course, you also have your guns or your rifles and stuff to protect yourself in self-defense. In Oklahoma, and I'm very sort of, I actually support this, even though it's a bit conservative and sort of very, it's not extreme, but it's very conservative Republican state anyway. And this is what I'm open-minded on certain issues like pro-choice and I'm even open to people that want to get married if they're gay. I'm for gay rights. I mean, none of my damn business. My little phrase is, who cares who sticks what where? I mean, it's none of my damn business where you stick whatever where. As long as you don't tell me what I can do in the bedroom, I really don't give a shit what you do in your bedroom. And if you want to get married and then wind up going through a nasty divorce like everyone else, knock yourself out. I really don't give a shit. It's none of my damn business. So I'm pro gay marriage and all that shit. I think should be up to the states, but U.S. Supreme Court's going to rule for that. And if the U.S. Supreme Court rules, finally put the thing to rest, the issue to rest. I mean, I believe it should be state by state by state. I mean, that's my own personal opinion. But in the state you're in, they should be able to have gay marriage. I mean, there's no reason not to. But then, especially in Oklahoma, it's a very, believe it or not, pretty religious state. They're very conservative in a lot of their thinking. So they prefer gays not to be married, let alone have gay lovers and all this stuff. If Oklahoma had their way, the majority of them probably would just not even have any gays in their state, bisexuals or any of those characters. So, anyway, to each his own. But the point is you should have a right to defend yourself, and one of the things is when you are, let's say, for instance, in Oklahoma here, if someone breaks into your house, and in the process you don't give them a notice that you're going to, by the way, I'm going to shoot your ass. In Oklahoma, you could shoot someone without notice. And I sort of somewhat agree with that. I actually somewhat agree with that because, now, someone under 18 and gets, or someone that's a child and breaks into your house and you shoot him, and you knew he was a child, I have sort of a problem with that. But if you're an adult over 18 and you break into someone's house, you're just looking for trouble. I mean, if you don't get bit and chewed up by a pit bull, because in Oklahoma they have a lot of pit bulls, you could wind up getting shot by the owner. And I sort of, I would prefer if the owner shoots him in the leg, puts him down instead of killing him. But you're infringing on someone else's property. And so, I mean, I know that's a gray area and sort of an extreme, but I sort of tend to agree with some of what the state is saying, the state of Oklahoma, on that issue. You shouldn't be going on people's property. That's someone else's property. They worked hard to have that property, or the things on that property, meaning the house or the building and the furniture and everything else. They work hard. They have to pay their taxes to keep. They have to pay their county tax or their state tax to keep that property. I mean, no one has a right to infringe on anyone else's property. So if you break and enter, or just even break a window to enter without permission of the owner, well, you're going to set yourself up, especially in Oklahoma, for some serious response. So anyway, everyone has a right to keep and bear arms for self-defense, and unfortunately it happens, but even for hunting. And then Amendment 3, which is interesting. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Now that's interesting. That's a very interesting situation. And normally you don't find that happen. But a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago, I can't remember what it was, but it happened up in Boston, and there was a Boston Marathon. And actually he was just tried, they're going to give him the death penalty. This kid don't have a prayer in hell. But the thing is these two brothers decide to plant these pressure cooker bombs because of whatever ideology or belief systems they have. I don't know. Anyway, they do it on these innocent victims. They're just runners in a marathon. And they plant these pressure cookers with bombs in them. And it ignites and blows up and kills a few people and injures many people. And then they go and the FBI gets involved, and whoever else, state government as well, of course, but mainly the FBI and the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, gets involved, the federal government, and they go in search of them. Now, what does this have to do with Amendment 3 is that in the process of going in search of them, they go into people's houses, regardless if the owner allows them to go in or not. And what that has to do with this amendment is, it's very interesting how they phrase it. It says, without the consent of the, well, no soldier shall. Now, a soldier could be either an actual military soldier in times of war. It could be the ATF, or it can be FBI. They're all quote unquote soldiers. Any U.S. Supreme Court ruling would rule that. So, and it says without the consent of the owner, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Now that's a very gray area, how they word that. And what that basically says is, like the Boston Marathon, when they had all the ATF and FBI soldiers going to people's houses looking for these two individuals, without even the consent of the owner. Maybe some owners consented, but probably there were several that did not consent to be searched, and they had no choice. Well, in the situation that was going on there, and this sort of can play into a lot of these conspiracy theories and all this other stuff, but like I said, it's a very gray area. Personally, I was against that. I was against the ATF and the FBI going into people's houses without the owner's permission or consent, looking for these two assholes that killed people and injured people because of their own stupidity and their own stupid belief systems or whatever have you. I mean, they had no right to do that. They did it. But then to infringe and to violate Amendment 3 in the course of trying to find these two individuals, no. Like I say, it's a very gray area. I mean, what was going on at the time was so they knew they killed that one brother, but there was still one other brother. And there was a firefight there when the one brother died, and they were maybe unsure if he had a gun on him or what have you. And they knew also what they did at the marathon. They blew up this thing. So they knew they were dangerous, or they knew the other younger brother was dangerous. And so maybe they didn't want to take any chances because he could have been held up in a house or whatever have you. He could have had a gun. I can understand that. And that's where it goes into that one line, in a manner to be prescribed by law. Meaning at the time, in that kind of situation, the ATF, FBI, whoever else, had sort of some wiggle room to work with there in order to get around that Amendment 3. Like I say, I disagree with what they did there, but by law, by the right itself, is a very gray area. And the only way you're ever going to find out really where that law or that right sits at is if one of the owners in Boston or thereabouts files a complaint. I don't know if they ever did. Maybe they never did. I don't know. But if they had filed a complaint in court, which eventually goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court would rule on that. And then you'd get much more clarification on that gray area. Because like I said, I'm no legal scholar. So, I mean, I am far from being a U.S. Supreme Court justice. So, I mean, they understand how to interpret that along with the facts much better than I could ever do. So, unless maybe I really read about it, but even then, I mean, I'm not experienced enough to really understand that, those ramifications that are in that gray area. So unless the U.S. Supreme Court rules on that Boston Marathon Amendment 3 issue, I guess you could say, then we don't really have any clarification on that gray area. But personally, I would be against something like that. I would be against something like that. But that's, me. Anyway, and then Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, for one thing, I want to say real quick, now Amendment 2 protects Amendment 1 and 4, as well as the other ones, but mainly Amendment 1 and Amendment 4. Unfortunately, Amendment 4 is over. I hate to say that. Actually, most of these amendments are all watered down over the years, over the decades, through other U.S. Supreme Court rulings that, you have to remember, U.S. Supreme Court justices are appointed by presidents. And the president has their own agenda. Now, once the U.S. Supreme Court justice gets confirmed by the U.S. Senate, then he or she can finally just be a judge and decide, hopefully, based on the law and the facts, and not be biased in any way politically. But of course, even the judges on the U.S. Supreme Court are sort of swayed a little bit more conservative, like Clarence Thomas is very ultra-conservative. And then you have Ruth Ginsburg, which is somewhat liberal. So they sort of, you try to get that balance in there. And that's why you have 9 judges, so it's 5-4. It can never be even. So. But anyway, Amendment 4 has been crapped on left and right. I don't even think Amendment 4 even exists. It does to a degree, but you really have to fight it in a court of law. Because between the U.S. Patriot Act, which, the irony of it all is, if you really read it, Amendment 4 is very direct. There is no gray area to it. A lot of the other amendments, if you read them, has some gray areas to them. But Amendment 4 is very, very direct. It's very plain and simple. There should be even probably a person of 12 years old could understand it. Even maybe a person 10 years old could understand it. It's very blunt, 6th grade education, very easy to understand. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. That's simple shit. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. Simple shit. Supported by oath or affirmation. Very simple shit. And particularly describing the place to be searched. Can't get no more simpler than that. And the persons or things to be seized. Wow. You can't get no more simpler than that. Actually, on the Amendment 4, U.S. Supreme Court shouldn't even have to rule on that. It's so blunt, so clear. And yet, look at what they did to Amendment 4. The most obvious amendment, the most plainly written amendment has been trashed, has been turned inside out and shitted on. From the U.S. Supreme Court on down. On down. I don't even need to go into it because we all know the day and age we live in. Your cell phone being tracked without your permission by the NSA. That's why I don't have a cell phone. I figure, fuck them. I don't make that many phone calls anyway a month, but I figure, look, I'm not going to have a conversation with someone I love or I care about or I like, and have some other asshole on the outside line or in some freaking booth in some NSA department listen in on a conversation. So who the fuck is it his business? I mean, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just having a conversation. And there is no probable cause. I never did anything wrong. Never violated any state or federal laws. And you're listening in on conversations. And and as far as Edward Snowden is concerned, I'm glad he did what he did. I support that. Now, if the federal government has a problem with that, you can knock on my door. The only problem I see that Edward Snowden violated was that he violated his company policy. Now, his company policy was that he couldn't do what he did. I mean, But outside of that, he did right by the people. Because look at what if you weighted on a scale and you looked at Amendment 4 of the Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution, and you have a scale, and look at how easily you can understand those words in Amendment 4. And if you take those words and look at all the shit that the federal government has done, well, since the inception of the U.S. Constitution, from the first Bank of the United States onward, and what Edward Snowden attempted to do in order to enlighten and to show you all the harm that's being done to you, and then giving you the choice either to give up your cell phone or whatever or not. I personally gave up my cell phone. I mean, I always wanted to do that anyway. But after that situation with Edward Snowden, I gave that fucking thing up. I don't want to be tracked. I don't want to be listened in on. That's a choice I made. I don't need all those fucking apps. So anyway, so when you have a scale and you look at how the U.S. government just shitted all over the Amendment 4, and look at what Edward Snowden did by revealing that stuff through WikiLeaks or wherever else have you, by right, by law, he's protected. Because the shit that the U.S. government has done to the people over a long period of time, over a very long time, of all those violations. And I don't even need to go into the violations. From Ruby Ridge on down. I don't need to go into Miranda rights. Well, that's mainly has to do with states, but also the federal government as well. Putting you in a prison cell and not being represented by an attorney. U.S. Patriot Act. Wiretapping. Without having, like it says right there. It says it right there. Supported by oath affirmation. A judge really doesn't have to rule. Let's say FBI wants a subpoena to wiretap your phone. Judges, it's like 99.4% of the warrants are approved of. And not only that, that's after the fact. That's after they started to wiretap your ass. Then they go to the judge. It doesn't say that here. Supported by oath or affirmation. And not only that, upon probable cause. Upon probable cause. You're talking to your grandmother about yarn. How she knitted a sweater for you. And here's some fucking asshole in the NSA listening to you. Where's the probable cause in that? And so if you take these situations as a whole, what Edward Snowden did, as far as not about the company actually has an actual complaint against him. Actually, if the company went after him for infringing on the policy, then Edward Snowden would probably have a problem. Okay? I mean, he could probably even get sued by the company. I don't know. But the thing is as far as the government itself, because this is all about the government, these U.S. amendments. If you take what Edward Snowden did and what the U.S. government has done for many years, for decades, for almost over 200 years, what they have been doing, as opposed to what Edward Snowden has done, Edward Snowden is a fucking saint, motherfucker. He's a fucking saint compared to all the shit the federal government's done. You understand? So if you look at it from a scale, no. Edward Snowden did good. I mean, so he leaked information. Well, what's the government have to hide? The irony of it all is, this is the irony of it all. The irony is this. The government says, well, so what? We listen. What do you have to hide? You don't have anything to hide. So what? Let people listen in on your conversations. Who cares? You don't have anything to hide, do you? But yet Edward Snowden reveals all this stuff about the federal government. All of a sudden, the federal government says, oh, it has to be hidden. It has to be secret. We have secret national security secrets and all this shit. Have you seen the world blow up? Have you seen a nuclear war? Have you seen Russia and China and United States and England going to war with each other since Edward Snowden did what he did? What national security secrets did he reveal? Have you seen another World Trade Center get blown up? Well, that's a whole different issue, and I'll probably go into that some other video. But have you seen another World Trade Center being blown up? Huh? Have you seen the President of the United States shot to death? Has he taken a bullet to the heart yet? Did he take a bullet in the leg? What has he done? What national security infringement or what national security secret that was revealed that created such excitement around the world that everyone's beating everyone up, causing bodily harm, defaming each other, wreaking havoc, turning the world inside out? Bullshit. No, I'll tell you what it is. What it is Edward Snowden revealed something that we maybe had an idea about, but we didn't really have the hard facts. The hard facts. And that's what Edward Snowden had given to us as a people in America, let alone the world, is facts. Real facts of how they do that shit. Of shit that actually does go on, that has been going on even before cell phones. Through wiretapping, since the Hoover days and the FBI. Hoover had lists and lists of people. How about McCarthy era? All that communist bullshit. That had nothing to do with fucking communism. That had to do with starting that process of getting into your fucking papers, to get into your houses, to get into your effects, to get into your persons. It didn't just start after 9/11. No, it started actually during the Hoover administration. Started way back then. And there were even cases before that. But Hoover, he's the one who really started that shit. He's the one. He's the one who started all that shit. And to me, you talk about someone being paranoid. He was the most paranoid motherfucker in the entire world. So the thing is that one Amendment 4 is very blunt. Very blunt. No secret, no hidden message in that Amendment 4. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing. Plain language. Sixth grader can understand it. And yet, the U.S. government has turned that amendment inside out. From the U.S. Supreme Court down. U.S. Supreme Court should have no problem interpreting that fucking... There's nothing even to interpret in that Amendment 4. That Amendment 4... Actually, I can't believe that the founders, when they wrote, when these officials or these congressmen wrote these Bill of Rights, that they were so stupid enough to put it so plainly in there. Now, that was stupid. I mean, all the other amendments are sort of written in different ways. But this fucking amendment is so plain, you would think that they would at least monkey around with it a little bit and not give so much power to the people. Because Amendment 4 gives a lot of power to the people. It takes a lot of power away from the government. There's nothing in there whatsoever that states that it's for the government. It's strictly for the people. Every single thing in there, every word, every phrase, every way that's worded, every way you can look at it, it's very plain. It's for the people. It's not for the government. But yet the government's been able to fuck that Amendment 4 inside out and all around, and to the point that even the U.S. Supreme Court now been ruling on it and all this shit. And there was really no reason for even U.S. Supreme Court to rule on it. It's so plain. You don't do that shit without probable cause. You don't have warrants without probable cause. Period. End of story. Now, what the U.S. Supreme Court does, though, is they take that one little word, unreasonable, and that's how they are able to get their interpretation and turn that fucking amendment inside out. When there's no unreasonable. What's unreasonable? Unreasonable what? The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Against shall not be right, and no warrant shall issue, but upon supported by oath or affirmation. Now, next, for instance, the government wants to go into your house without you there. They can't do that, not according to that amendment, without an oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Particularly, that means specifically. Now, when you take the certain facts, let's say a government official comes in your house and, I don't know, he takes your computer out of your house. Just decides, well, I'm going to take a look at it. I don't know. I'll bring it back. He's probably at work. See, okay, we have 7 hours. Okay, well, see, okay, great. He just drove down the street. Okay, let's go in. Okay, let's get his computer. We have 3 hours to look through this computer, do whatever we can, download the whole damn thing, upload everything, and then bring the computer back. He won't even know what hit him. Understand? You call that reasonable? Is that reasonable? They just do that without any cause, without no probable cause? Just decided to go do that. Well, that's something to do on our lunch break. See, and that's where even that word unreasonable, the U.S. Supreme Court should have no problem with. But they make a big deal out of it. I just wanted to clarify that Amendment 4 is really for the people. And why the Founding Fathers or the Congress at that time wrote it so plain, I have no idea. But it's good that they did, because actually that's the only amendment that's so plain in our favor as the people. That Amendment 4 is anti-government, pro-people, pro-Americans. So anyway. All right. And then there's only like 1 or 2 other amendments I want to get into. Unfortunately, this video is going a little longer than I thought. Amendment 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or sub-naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or liberty, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, the only thing everyone knows about, double jeopardy, so I don't need to get into that. But what I like to say about that is about nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That's another thing that the government's just shit it all over. They have auctions left and right of all your shit they confiscated, and you don't even get anything back, unless you take them to court. But yet it says here pretty plainly, without just compensation. You know, if they decide to sell your car, well, you're out of shit luck. It's the government property. So I just, but the key of that is without due process of law. The government, see, and the irony, when you really think about it, the government is, the government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people. It has nothing to do with that. Unfortunately, not now. Maybe 200 years ago I had a half a chance. But now, it has nothing to do. The only time they want anything from us is it has to do with their elections. Or maybe they have a bill they want to get passed through, and they have some, pig fat attached to it, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like some pork attached to it, some shit attached to it. Not that I don't eat pork. I like pork, but you know what I mean. I just like let's say the bill's about I don't know. The bill is about illegal aliens coming into the country, but they'll put something in there that has something to do with, the Environmental Protection Agency. Why don't we have drones flying over the country line? Over the border. We also have problems with the air. So let's stick that in there too. It's so much bullshit. But my whole point is, without the due process of law, and government tends to try to jeopardize that as much as possible, and it's really not for or of or by. It's only what suits the government officials at the time. So if they want to put something in an illegal alien bill, and yet stick something in there with air control because, air pollution or whatever the fuck it is, only because they got some, they're saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to take, you're going to get that contract for some company who's going to do, because they're all contracts and shit. So I'm going to make your air better. So, oh, great, yeah, you'll get that $100,000 contract as soon as I get this bill, this part through that bill. You'll get your money eventually. That's all it is. So it's not of the people, by the people, for the people. It has nothing to do with that, unfortunately. And so that without due process of law, you should have due process of law. And most of the time you do. Don't get me wrong. Most of the time you do, but there are a lot of cases which you don't. And to me, there should be no exception to the rule, to the law, when everyone is equal under the law, when it especially comes to life, liberty, or property. And I would like to speak to that just very briefly. Now, life, liberty, or property. Well, property usually is a civil suit. That is, you sue another person, or several people sue each other. It could be class action, whatever. And you're suing for money. You're suing for actual property. And then there's liberty. Liberty is usually it's a criminal situation. That is, criminal prosecution. You get put in jail, so you lose your liberty. You can't just come and go as you like. And then life. In times of, like I said in the other video, if it's a vicious crime or it's rape and it's torture and it's a child involved that, that you kill them for no reason at all or whatever, yeah, then you get the death penalty. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Like if I was on a jury and I had to consider a death penalty, if the guy was holding up a bank and got startled in the process and killed one of the guards, I'd give him life in prison without parole. On the other hand, let's say if there's two guys hold up a bank and one guy gets startled and draws his gun to kill somebody and then thinks twice, I don't want to kill this person. And then his other friend says, look, if you don't kill him, I'm going to kill your ass and then I'm going to kill him. Kill the guard or whatever. So then the guy kills the guard. to save his own ass. Then I'd give him life. I'd give him, life with parole. Then I give him life with parole in a situation like that. Now, on the other hand, let's say they go into a bank and they torture and they cut up and they beat up and they take his limbs off and they twist his face off and they torch his face with flame or, some really vicious, sick shit to the guard. You're going to get the fucking death penalty. With no questions asked. I don't care. You could have F. Bailey. I mean, you could have fucking Johnny well, he's not around anymore. Johnny Cochran, or you can have fucking Alan Dershowitz. I fucking care. I'll tell you right now. You torture someone, you burn them alive and all this shit when you don't have to. Of course, you don't have to do it under any circumstances. Not even in times of war. There's no reason to do all that shit. And, and if you do that, you're going to get the fucking death penalty. And, Alan Dershowitz is a very anti-death penalty. But I'll tell you something. I mean, he's Jewish and all, but I'll tell you, if I was on his jury and he was the defense attorney, and his client just beat up the guard and tortured him and took his limb off and set his face on fire and butchered him and tried to burn him alive, that motherfucker's going to get the death penalty. I don't give a shit if you got Alan Dershowitz or 5,000 Alan Dershowitzes. You're going to go get hung. And if it had my right, fuck the lethal injection. That's too nice. You need a good hanging so your neck snaps and you have some pain involved. You get electrocuted so your brain fries a little bit. You get a firing squad so when the bullet goes into your heart you have serious fucking pain. Or you get the guillotine and have your head chopped off. Yeah. To me, because the victim didn't have here, it wasn't like the victim had a choice. Well, it's not like, the perpetrator said to the victim, okay, now you have a choice. You can either be lethally injected or you can have a guillotine. What's your choice? No, he didn't have a fucking choice. Okay? Well, the same thing. What you do to a victim, you should have the same fucking shit done to you. As close as possible. Now, I know no unusual cruel and punishment. I understand that. But for many decades, there are many states, especially the Old West, they did hangings all the time. They snap your fucking neck right into two, if they could. And I agree with that. That's some pain. You're hanging there from a fucking rope, and your body's wiggling around, and all this shit, and you don't die instantly. I mean, you do in a way, but you don't. There's some pain involved in there, and that's what you need to go. That's what every murderer needs to undergo. Is pain. It's not just a little fucking heart trouble there with the fucking lethal injection. No, I'm talking serious fucking pain. Head chopped off, firing squad. Electrocution is badass. Actually, that's what they should do to people that torture their victims and just disarm them or, dismember them or whatever. I mean, electrocution is the best way to go. Because that shit fry your fucking brain, man. Your brain is fucking being fried. That's some serious pain. But that's my own opinion. So anyway, that's the Amendment 5, Of course, there's no just compensation. They just take your private property and sell it, And, Amendment 9, Amendment 10 is supposed to be for the people, but, I'm not really going to go into that because that's pretty well, that hardly ever is applied in any U.S. Supreme Court rulings, let alone in any situation. And then, just briefly, because I know this is going way over the time limit that I wanted on this video, but on Amendment 14, all persons born and naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside, No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, or without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And that mainly came out of the American Civil War. Then it goes on a little bit with other things as well, and that sort of has to do with the what is the other one? Also has to do with that, has the same 14 and 15, like the right of citizens of Amendment 15 is the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, as well as Amendment 13. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So Amendment 13, 14, and 15 pretty much all came out of the American Civil War. And even though I'm very pro-state rights, and I am, I usually, like for instance, let's say for instance, after that, there were still hangings of black people in the South. There were still, white bathrooms and black bathrooms. There were still white faucets and black faucets. There were still, they weren't permitted they were not admitted to colleges, let alone schools. And even in schools, they were probably segregated to a large extent. Whatever. They weren't allowed to intermarry, mainly in the South. They really considered that sodomy almost, because they looked at blacks as being animals more than anything. Subhuman intelligence. Situations like that, even though I'm very pro-state right, situations like that, for one thing, you got to realize blacks are humans. There are a lot of people out there that think that blacks are that are like animal-like thinking going on. Now, there are some unruly blacks that will have riots and all kinds of stupid shit. I agree, and they're just assholes. But thank goodness, the majority of the blacks around America don't do that. There are just some groups that are just a bunch of fucking prick assholes, okay? That should be locked up and have the key thrown away on them. But for the majority of the blacks in America, they're working class Americans just like anyone else. And they're human. I know that sounds stupid, but a lot of people don't think they're human. There are a lot of actual racists out there that actually think that blacks are subhuman intelligence, and there are racists out there that think all Jews own the world. I don't own the fucking world. So there's people out there that have these preconceptions of people based on absolutely no facts whatsoever. So when you realize, hopefully you realize that blacks or Hispanics or people that are quote unquote of color, let's say, even though whites are of color, they're not really white, they're like pale. But, I'm just sticking with the Amendment 13, 14 and 15 within the context of what I'm talking about. You can see I get off on things, so I can, but I'm not going to do it. Anyway, but for blacks, there are people out there that actually think blacks are not human. They're stupid, or they're subhuman intelligence or whatever. They just think that. I mean, I don't like what Obama does politically. But apparently he is one smart motherfucker because somehow or another his ass got into office. So he's not stupid. That tells you right there he doesn't have subhuman intelligence to get into office. He was able to maneuver his way into office just like all the other presidents before him. Regardless if he had to make deals or not, which they all do. But he was smart enough, intelligent enough to get his ass back. And not only that, the economy was low as shit. Everyone was unemployed. They had unemployment problems. You had all this other shit going on. You had housing market problems. And this motherfucker still gets into office. Now, that's no dummy. Now, I know you're going to say, well, yeah, well, he's half black, half white. Maybe he gets that superior intelligence from the white gene. Maybe, maybe not. Do you have proof of that? I don't know. As far as I know, he considers himself a black person. So, he looks black. He's probably got a dominant black gene in him because apparently between his Kenyan father and his Irish mother, apparently the dominant gene was black in his case. Okay, so he's black. I like to put that to rest if we can. Anyway, so the point is there are blacks for like, I don't know what the percentage. I mean, it's mentally retarded in every race. I mean, but I mean, literally mentally retarded, actual mentally retarded people. Okay, and I know people say you can't say that. They're mentally. What is the word? The new catchphrase. No, they're mentally retarded. They're fucking slow. Retarded just means slow. It doesn't mean disparaging. I have a cousin-in-law that's mentally retarded. I think he's a cool guy. I have no problem with him. He has pleasures in life and all that. He's a great kid. He just, can't drive a car and do things that the average person can because of his intelligence level. He's slower. You put him on the highway, he couldn't react fast enough to someone cutting in front of him. Because why? He's slow. He's retarded. But we have this thing, what is it? Oh, mentally challenged. The person that came up with that phrase, mentally challenged, was actually mentally challenged, if you know it. Anyway, so the point is this, is that there are people that think that blacks are subhuman intelligence, which I would say 95% of them are not, okay? Unless you're born with a mentally retarded birth defect, like that, a defect at birth or something. Or you're hit in the head with a sledgehammer, or you have a car accident and you become comatose and you wind up becoming mentally retarded. But outside of these situations, 95% of the blacks or so are not subhuman intelligence and they're not animal-like. And therefore, they have as many rights under the law as anyone else. And considering that the amendments were put into place, they're just as equal as you and I. So therefore, they should be treated equally, like anyone else. Now, if you fucking burn down a building or have a riot, your ass is going to go to fucking jail, regardless of what the fucking reason's for. I mean, you might be fucking... what is this new thing? Freddie Gray or some shit in, what is that, in Baltimore or whatever. I don't know. I think his name's Freddie Gray. It's too many names for me. I don't know who. Anyways, somebody, or Davis or something. Anyway, the point is you're not going to be able to go out there as a black person and think you're going to be equally protected under the law when you burn down somebody's fucking house. Yeah, you'll get a due process of right, but your ass is going to jail. But if you don't break any laws and do shit like that, then yes, you have due process of rights and you're equally protected under the law like anybody else. And if you want to be admitted into a college and you pass the exam, the SAT or whatever it may be, to get because I'm against affirmative action. I think everybody should be treated equally. Either you do it or you don't. Either you pass the SAT or you fucking don't. You don't get in. Period. Either you have that intelligence enough to compete in fucking college or you don't. That's just my subjective opinion. But nevertheless, now if a black has more intelligence than a white, and his score is higher than a white person on an SAT, you better put his ass fucking in that college. If he finds out that his score is higher than the white guy, he's going to fucking sue that white guy and fucking sue the school. And I'd fucking support him for that. Absolutely support him for that. So there are circumstances where you cannot infringe on a black person's rights. They're equal under the law. So they have due process rights like anyone else. Unless they, burn down buildings and start riots and all this other shit. Then yes, the state has to come in and fucking reprimand them and throw them in jail. No, they still have their due process rights, but you're going to jail. You might get bonded out, but you're still going to fucking jail. So on that, I'm very pro state rights, but there are certain things, as long as you understand that blacks don't have subhuman intelligence. Once you get past that mark, that line there, then you realize that yes, Amendment 13, 14, and 15 absolutely makes sense. It should be put in place. Because sometimes the states can get sort of out of whack there. So, well, a lot of people, a lot of the Southerners probably don't like me for saying that. But, I'll give you an example. Then I'm going to let go of this video because it's getting quite longer than I thought. My father-in-law, he's deceased now. His name is John. I won't give the last name, but his name was John. He was a really cool guy. I really liked him. I well respect. He was a man's man. He never did anything on credit cards. Never had any, mortgages or anything. Everything was by cash. Your word is good, as good as can be. Like my wife and I had bought. My wife, that is her father, of course. We had bought a car. I don't know. It was back in 2000 and. I think it was back in 2000, 2001 in there. And we had bought a car from him, a nice little, an old Volvo GL 240. It was a nice car. I love that car. Love Volvos, especially the older ones. And we bought it from him for $400. Didn't have to put it in writing or anything. He said, you pay it out, I think it was $100 a month. You pay it out, that's all that matters. And we paid it out, and that was it. End of story. That's the kind of guy he was. You give him your word, you don't break it, he respects you. Vice versa. And he was a really, in my book, he was a champ. I mean, they had a lot of problems here and there, but still, you give him your word, and you fulfill, he respects you, and that's a great exchange between two people. Well, anyway, he was also a fucking racist. Okay, I mean a hardcore fucking racist. I mean, like at the dinner table, he would just throw the word nigger around like it was nothing. I never heard the word nigger so many times until I got married into this family. Not that they're all like that, but anyway. So anyway, they threw that word around a lot. But it wasn't like really in a bad way. It's just that's how, instead of describing a black person as a Negro or Negroid or black or brown or whatever, they just say nigger. They don't even, it's not done, at least it wasn't done by John in a way that was like hurtful or anything. Like, with the intention to kill or to maim or to hurt somebody. It was just, that was the word he used to describe a black person. Didn't even think twice about it. I was like, oh, holy shit, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. But anyway, my point is this. What happened was, his son's daughter was dating a black guy. And she got pregnant by him. Okay? And she decided to have this kid, to have the baby. Now, John, like I said, downright fucking racist. Downright fucking racist. But yet, this mulatto kid that his, niece, I guess niece, I don't know all those terms very well, but I think it was niece. I guess, I don't know, whatever, how that works. But anyway, his son's daughter had this half black, half white child. And there are pictures everywhere of John loving this black and white baby. And was a girl. And she's a cute girl. And she's much older now. She's a, smart kid. I don't see her much, but still, she was raised okay. I haven't heard anything negative about her. I mean, she didn't get in trouble with the law or any of that shit. But the point is John loved that fucking kid. John would put that little black and white child up on his knee and love him and kiss him and just show the child off, and yet he was a fucking racist. So there are even, my point is, there are even reservations when it comes to certain things in life. And even though there are some downright racist motherfuckers out there, bias, prejudice, preconceptions, all this other shit, even those that have that, somewhere deep inside they have a little heart there. They might not admit that to you. It might take a situation like that black baby being born, that black and white baby being born. But he still, now don't get me wrong, I mean, John still did not want to affiliate with the girl's partner, who was black. I met him. He seemed like a really cool guy. He was sharp. He came over, I think it was on a Christmas Eve once, because here in my in-laws, they're not Jewish, so they celebrate Christmas and all that stuff. And I think it was Christmas Eve, and I met him. He was sharp. He was dressed, tall guy, good-looking guy, real good-looking guy. And but yet John would not talk to him. But yet the baby he had no problem with. So, in other words, racism comes in all shapes and sizes, so to speak. Shapes and colors, so to speak. So, anyway, so I wanted to give a pretty good idea, give some perspective to this U.S. Constitution and the amendments attached to it that appeased the masses, so they wouldn't have another American Revolution against the Federalists that made the Articles of Confederation null and void and started the U.S. Constitution. Because if you look at the U.S. Constitution, all the articles were only about the government. It had nothing to do with the people. So in order to appease the people, the masses, the majority of the people, they put these Bill of Rights in there. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this. This is much longer than I thought, but nevertheless, hope you were enlightened once again and gave you some new insight, or just not new insight, but just insight into really certain things in life that sometimes people can't see it for what it is. They have to sort of, sugarcoat it in a way, and I will not sugarcoat shit. I will not sugarcoat it. I won't do things, real quick, I like to say, I won't do things that will incite or provoke anyone. Not at all. I'm not that type of person to do that. But I will enlighten you. So, anyway, have a good day.